Our next presenter is Todd Watkins of Paragon. He's going to be doing a presentation about invasive weed harvesting.
Thank you. First, we just appreciate the opportunity to be here and just tell you a little bit about Paragon, about our services. There's two things I will say first. Number one, I'm not with the DEP. Number two, I apologize for the southern drawl. I was born in Mississippi, and I had been in the southeastern United States, so hence the southern drawl here. But just to give you a little idea of who we are, Paragon, normally there would be three of us here. Dan Mount is the sales manager for Paragon. Ed Moyer is our operations manager. Dan is out of the country. Ed is on a project, and so you have me today. I'm the VP of engineering for Paragon. I'll tell you a little bit about our company. We have just a little bit about Paragon, what our services are, what our equipment is, and then we'll talk about some projects, including the Mountain Lake project that we're currently on here locally. Background in industrial for 14 years, and then on the background in environmental recycling technologies, regulatory permitting and landfills, and we'll talk a little bit about the experience base with each one of these guys and how that pertains. Dan is a U.S. Navy veteran with over 25 years in environmental industry. Dan actually served as a city manager for two different cities in the state of Ohio, and that experience has been very beneficial as far as with clients, much like yourself, many municipalities that maybe the revenue base is not quite there, and as far as the public to private funding opportunities that we try to work with our clients on. Ed is over 30 years of experience in the environmental industry. Ed actually has Dan is a graduate of, I'm from the South, I've learned how to say this, the Ohio State University. But both of these guys are graduates of Ohio State University. Ed is on the agricultural side. So that just gives you a little bit about, a little background on the leadership as far as an experience for Paragon. Just a little bit, we're not going to spend a lot of time here as far as who Paragon is. While our headquarters is in Houston, we're kind of a national company. One of our larger operations is in Newcomerstown, Ohio. We have a 60,000 square foot facility there. Basically, all of our equipment that we're mobilizing throughout the Northeast would come out of that facility in Ohio. We also have warehouses in New York, Horseheads, Pennsylvania as well. We'll talk a little bit about what we do, from whether it's from bathymetrics to water treatment to remediation. We're going to discuss dredging, and it takes a brave soul to talk about the D word with the DEP in the room. So we'll talk about that a little bit as well. And then we'll discuss a little bit about our customer base, and you'll see some familiar names there. One that's not in our project that we're going to talk about is Universal Studios. We actually performed a job last year with Universal Studios in Orlando. We actually removed the sediment from the show pond in Universal Studios, and that was a very interesting project because we had to work at night. Being a tourist attraction, we had to wait until the park closed. Then we had to wait until security made sure that there were no teenagers hiding in the roof tiles. I mean, they have a pretty in-depth security sweep of the park. And then apparently there are people that have enough revenue base to rent the park. And so if there was a special event, we had to avoid those as well. But worked at night. But I bring that up just to show you a little bit about the flexibility. One of the things that we're proud of is, for Paragon is that every project is individually engineered, independent. We're very flexible in how we approach the projects and with our clients. Really service and solution. When you look at how do we deliver efficient and cost productive environmental solutions to our clients, one of the points I'd like to bring out is we quite frequently, especially in lake management, you guys may have an engineering firm or a consultant that is providing an engineered solution for your project, and then you're looking for a service provider. Many times it's very easy to find someone to tell you what to do. It's very hard to find someone that actually does it. We're the company that actually does it. And so, but in that, we also, many times we have clients, we try to understand their needs because they're very specific in the solution that they have that's been specified or engineered for them for that potential project. And many times we're able to go to the client and say, this is what you're asking for. This is a potential suggestion that can save you money. And quite often we're able to provide cost-saving analysis from that standpoint that meets the client's needs. An example of that, we'll talk about it, Mountain Lakes. Obviously that is a city-owned lake, or lakes, there's 7 lakes there, I believe. We actually were able to partner with the borough there, the Mountain Lakes, and just say, you know, you guys have trucks, you have manpower, we can bring the material to the shore, and then you guys pick it up with your front end loader. You take care of the disposition of the organic matter, and that's saving them money from that standpoint on that project.
Where do they get rid of the material?
Do what?
Where do they get rid of the material?
I believe at a landfill. Now, organic matter from a lake pond, you know, it has a lot of nutrient value. Quite often, if there's a farmer that you can partner with, whether it's cattle feed and things of that nature, or organic material to go on the farmland, there's other options, obviously. But yeah, that's at this point with this project, we're basically bringing it to the shoreline for their disposition of it. I talked about Dan Mount as our sales manager, also does some marketing, but Dan has a side hobby. He's writing a children's book for environmental services, and so this is some of the artwork from that book. But basically, wanted to highlight, when you look at our background from discharge requirements, from our regulatory permitting background, we're very familiar. We also have Dan would probably get on to me for wearing a Paragon industrial clothing here when it should say environmental. We have an industrial division, an environmental division, but that industrial division helps us to be very adept as far as NPDES permits, discharge limits, regulatory permits, things of that nature that you may run into, analytical testing, things of that nature as well. Increased costs, we talked about that a little bit, how to help our clients manage the cost of a project, not just specifically doing exactly what the client has asked for, unless they specifically say, no, this is what I want you to do. But giving that feedback as far as how to save you know, money in a project. A variety of compliance projects, whether it's dewatering, solid separation, desludging. We have a depth of experience in a lot of various areas from that standpoint, and we'll get into that on the projects as well. So let's start with our services and some of the equipment. Bathymetrics, really understanding what's down there. This is what we call the Dolphin. It's a remotely operated surveying boat. It's basically an aquatic drone. And this unit uses ultrasonic technology, and what we will do is on your lake, basically we will, in an XY grid, survey your lake and provide a depth analysis of what your lake is, and then provide a 3D rendering that's pretty helpful and that's color-coded for the depth. One of the reasons we start with this, really as you start to see your lake health in the various areas, we recommend, and this is a fairly, very cheap service actually, but just understanding what's going on with your lake and the life of your lake. You may have a cove that started at 8 feet deep, and then over the years, as it slowly silts in or as runoff, whatever happens, and then you start to see vegetation daylighting in that cove. If you have a bathymetric survey from the last 5 to 10 years and you slowly see that the depth of that cove is filling in, it just really gives you a more complete view of the health of your lake and understanding what's occurring inside your lake, because obviously if you're not without that information, you really don't know what the depth is, what's occurring at your lake, and it's pretty surprising to various clients. But that is that's again a remotely operated surveying boat, and it can really offer a lot of insight as far as what's going on depth-wise.
You say it's inexpensive. Can you give a range of what?
Well, it depends on the size of the lake. I mean, we have some lakes where it may be a 10-acre lake where it may only be a couple $1,000s. Part of that, is obviously the mobilization. Is just traveling to and from the site. But we perform bathymetric surveys anywhere from a 2-acre lake to a 200-acre lake. Obviously, the 200-acre lake's a little more expensive, but it's not. But yeah, we can if we can basically look at Google Earth and look at the size of your lake and give you a quote for that lake remotely without having to visit it, and also just understand the vegetation. I will say real quickly, if you have a lot of surface vegetation, then that will force us at some point to actually manually probe, just because the boat obviously can't traverse through an outbreak of lily pads, a mature growth of lily pads. Yes, sir.
Yeah, what is the equipment that's creating that image?
Ultrasonic.
Ultrasonic.
Yes.
Thank you.
Weed harvesting. This is one of the services that we're currently engaged in at Mountain Lakes. We're currently on Birchwood Lake in the Mountain Lakes community. We call this the brontosaurus because it eats vegetation. And so it's the perfect piece of equipment. I would say in the past, a lot of our, including us, but a lot of our competitors, basically with a hydro rake, they're just basically scooping the vegetation off the surface, and as soon as that bucket is full, they're basically traversing the full length of the lake to a dump site. Okay, and you're paying for a lot of travel time instead of actually harvesting. The beautiful thing about this equipment here, and hopefully you guys, I don't know if this is on. Am I missing it? I'm going to move away just a little bit, but hopefully you can still hear me. But you can see the blue drum here currently in that picture. That blue drum is a steel drum that actually nips against a soft rubber roller. And basically the way this piece of equipment works is, as this weed harvester is traversing across the lake, those drums are turning, and the weeds are actually pulled into that pinch point between the two drums. And so that unit has the ability to pull the weeds out by the roots. Okay. Now, more mature growth, cattails, phragmites, things of that nature that have a really aggressive root ball is probably going to break those off, at the stem or whatever. And we'll talk about a little more aggressive way of harvesting those. But this unit is very unique in the fact that it's, as it's pulling the weeds through that nip, it has a wire screen conveyor belt that allows the water to flow through the belt, and then the weeds are trapped on the belt and conveyed up into about a 3 cubic yard hopper behind that unit. And so once that hopper is full, I think some of you saw it yesterday actually, that we had a site visit. This screen mesh belt actually flips over, and that hopper has a rubber conveying belt on the bottom. So that belt will actually flip over, and then you can discharge onto the shoreline, or we utilize a pontoon barge. We actually will offload onto a pontoon barge and just minimize that amount of travel time that when you lose from a production standpoint. This unit is entirely hydraulic, other than a small gasoline-powered engine that actually runs the hydraulic power unit. We utilize a biodegradable hydraulic oil in this unit. And yes.
What's the draft?
Like 12 inches at most. So it's an aluminum pontoon unit. The other thing I would say is, when we talk about the more aggressive weeds, as far as like phragmites or cattails, you can also convert this unit with a weed harvesting or a weed cutter head on the front, which is basically like a oscillating sickle bar that has 2 vertical units and a horizontal unit that's the width. And so we can actually, like in one application we have in Tennessee, where you're actually taking the phragmites, cutting them off around 4 to 5 feet below the water line, and then harvesting the phragmites that way. And there are studies that show that you can actually drown phragmites. Obviously, you've got to take care of the structure near the shoreline, because it will creep and obviously expand. But if you can get into deeper water and cut them 4 to 5 feet below the water line, you can control the growth from that standpoint as well. And so that is one piece of equipment we're currently using at Birchwood. Second piece of equipment is what we call the P-Rex. This unit is basically, I don't know how to, obviously you can see it. It's, what's unique about this unit, it has the black rubber tracks right there. And so this unit can actually track on land and track into water. Most of our units, they're either trailer mounted where you need a launch capability, or we're going to have to bring in a crane to sit the unit in the water. The uniqueness of this unit is it actually tracks into the water as long as the slope is not a drop off, basically. Very versatile piece of equipment. Right there you see on the front of that unit, it has an excavator bucket. That picture was taken on a project where we had a client that had trees that had fallen into their lake, into the pond there, and so we were actually using that to pull some of those logs out of the lake and get them to the shoreline where they could be managed. All of that unit is based off of multiple attachments off of this arm here, this hydraulic arm. One attachment that's currently at Birchwood is what we would call a hydro rake, and it's basically a large bucket that very much like a dozer bucket or a front end loader bucket, except this unit is, the structure is ribs and it has a wire mesh on the back so the water can flow through the bucket and capture any organic matter. So that is a great tool for getting lower in the water, we can grab lily pads, things of that nature. We have a root rake, which is basically a very similar device, a similar attachment, but it's actually turned 180 degrees, so you're actually pulling toward yourself. Part of the project at Mountain Lakes is in the coves, is just looking at the leaf debris, organic matter on the bottom of the shallow coves, any logs, wood debris, things that are on the bottom that are biodegrading from that standpoint. There's also a weed cutting head for that unit as well, in which we can get about 6 to 7 feet below the water surface and cut vegetation below the surface there. And then we have a clamshell attachment, which is basically a hydraulic opposing buckets that basically clamshell and clamp together that we use to harvest cattails, phragmites, and actually can get the root ball with that unit. Dredging, the 4-letter word of environmental. So what do most people think of when dredging? Obviously there's been a lot of misapplications to mechanical dredging. There's obviously applications in which you need to increase the depth in a body of water. But there's also some other ways where you can also take the ecosystem into account. And this is the difference between Paragon and mechanical is hydraulic dredging. Hydraulic dredging, basically instead of just the manual digging, when you look at the studies from University of Texas, Michigan, there's several schools out there that have looked at, compared basically mechanical dredging to hydraulic dredging. And I even saw it on Emily's slide as far as the sediment resuspension. Basically, hydraulic dredging is using a hydraulic open face pump. It's basically like a vacuum. And so all of that silt, any of the heavy metals that are trapped in that sediment layer are being sucked into this pump and removed from the body, from the lake body. Versus the mechanical where you have this plume of sediment that's being redispersed, basically. We have just a little, hopefully I don't have any sound here, so I can talk through this. No, there's some sound. I don't know what I did.
It paused.
The sound was on this one. Yours doesn't have it, it sounds like. No.
Well, I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to need to get back to where I was at. I think that's it. All right, I'll talk over that. Basically, this is just a little depiction. When you look at from Paragon standpoint, the hydraulic dredging, we're going to use an open face hydraulic pump. We're going to pull in from that unit that you see in the water. We're going to use shaker screens and take out all the large material. Those shaker screens that you see highlighted right there, we've been on trout run, salmon run. We've actually pulled live salmon off the shaker screens that have come through the hydraulic dredge and then reintroduced them back into the water. Turtles as well. Basically, we'll go from the shaker screens to a clarifying tank. On this clarifying tank, we'll use a food grade polymer if needed to flocculate the solids. That helps to, that will help on the next stage with the centrifuge. Paragon has over 120 centrifuges in our arsenal to utilize, but basically we use a clarifier where we further drop out the solids, and then we'll take the solids through the centrifuge, and we'll basically take the solids out less than 5 microns. Those centrifuges can run up to 3,000 Gs, so basically the force, 3,000 times 1 G of force. So obviously that force, centrifugal force, can really sling out and force the solids to the wall cake of the centrifuge and provide you a very clean effluent that's going back to your lake, and then also the solids that are then deposited wherever, whether it's a beneficial reuse of the solids, or whether it's an MSW landfill. We're going to come out of that process above the paint filter test that's required for municipal landfills, so that it's a solid waste, not a liquid waste, and that's very key obviously from a cost and tipping fee standpoint. Yes.
That setup, how big is the setup?
Basically, we can set that set up on around a 40 by 80. Most lake projects that we're involved with, we're working in the shallow coves where we can see the organic matter on the shallow coves down to 8 feet, basically. As far as the depth of your lake and trying to dredge the entire lake, probably cost prohibitive. I mean, that would be, but really the shallow areas are really more where we're going to be more effective as far as the hydro raking, root raking, kind of that twofold approach of removing the organic matter off the bottom in the shallow areas, and then also harvesting the weeds in those shallow areas, and obviously, the deeper areas of a lake, the invasive, you're getting below that photosynthesis line at some point anyway, to where the invasive weeds are a little bit shallower. Yes, sir.
That large system that you said takes up 80 by whatever.
Right.
I'm assuming there's a base cost to have that system set up, and then it's a per acre, or is it a cubic yard?
We're going to have typically we would have a mobilization, demobilization fee of just the transportation to bring all of our equipment on site. And then it's based on the equipment, because, I mean, we could stack out 8 centrifuges depending on what the project looks like. But basically that would be whether we're using a dredge, whether we're using the weed harvester, whether we have a work barge. It really depends on, and that's why I state every project is really independent. And we're going to give you a quote based or a proposal based on that specific project. Yes, ma'am.
So you're coming from Ohio with that equipment?
Yes.
So if we've got a couple of lakes that are interested in doing the same system, could that
Absolutely.
mob and demob then be?
If you guys can get together and want
Right.
to split the mob demob, we're very flexible.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no reason for us to charge that mob demob
Exactly.
on every project if,
Right, right.
if the equipment's in the area.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
So my experience has been over the past decades is where to get rid of the stuff. So wouldn't it be in your interest to identify places where that could be, where we could put the stuff? Because then it'd be like one stop shop.
And we can provide the transportation disposal. Unfortunately, we don't have the relationship in every state like you guys may have. You guys may have contacts, you may have contacts with local farmers, with, we just, at some point, we're limited on contacts when we come into an area, and at some point, we're getting basically where an MSW landfill is about the only option we have. And that's just not it's cost prohibitive if there is a beneficial reuse option in the area. And we're not, look, I will say in every project, it has to be a beneficial relationship for your service provider and a beneficial relationship for the lake. And so we're open to saving you guys as much money as possible, and that's just, we just don't have the contacts everywhere as far as that goes. You may find some of these larger companies, like a Clean Harbors or someone like that, that has that nationwide ability to, but I would venture to say that we're going to be more cost effective than they are. Yes, sir.
Can you give us any kind of idea of a cost of, you know, what a small project would be, or the mobilization? Because, I mean, we wouldn't, there's things that would be cost prohibitive
Right.
to lake communities to even do a
Right.
small project if it's.
So at Mountain Lakes, I mean, you guys are a small community. I mean, everybody's going to talk, and I think they're a city organization, so it's probably public knowledge there. I mean, basically at Mountain Lakes, we have 3 pieces of equipment. We have 2 operators that are in that unit, and that's about $19,000 a week.
Okay.
So that's running a weed harvester. We've been in multiple lakes. I mean, Crystal Lake, Wildwood, Mountain Lakes, Birchwood. And so we performed that service last year. This is the first year that we've been on Mountain Lakes. I believe they had a prior service provider. We were at Mountain Lakes at the end of the year last year for their 2023 budget, basically, and we worked through November all the way up to the freeze until the water froze over. Then we were, obviously, we couldn't perform any more services at
They're
that
doing
point.
the trucking and the disposal. That's
They're doing the trucking and the disposal because they're a city-owned lake. Yes, sir.
So that 19,000 per week, what's the target on number of acres?
At Mountain Lakes, basically they have giving us some target areas as far as the shallow coves to ensure that we're getting all of as far as the hydro raking, the root raking. Then we're taking they have priorities as far as what they want to achieve, and then any time past that, we're out in the larger body of water actually weed harvesting cutting lower, 7 to 8 feet below surface. And when those weeds come to the surface, then we're harvesting those weeds. So it's basically on a weekly basis.
How
Yes, sir.
long are you gonna be at, Mountain Lakes?
About another week and a half. And yeah, we're open to meeting you guys there and letting you see the operation. I mean, we had 2 different organizations represented yesterday, approximately 9 people that were on site. We would like notification if at all possible, because basically if you go to Mountain Lakes right now, we have two personnel that are operating there. One is on the P-Rex, one is on the weed harvester, and they're out there just working, and if you go there and they're not working, you'll see my email, you can let me know.
Is there a way you can get us the information from the town where they're disposing of this material? Because I've called every landfill, every nursery in New Jersey, nobody wants the material coming out of the lake. Nobody wants it.
I mean, surely a landfill will take it if you pay them.
I called the landfill in West Milford that takes everything. I said, we're gonna hydro-rake the lake. They said, we don't want it, and we don't know anybody that wants the
I
material.
would be surprised if they can, if you have because I've worked in the landfill industry, I mean, if you have a waste profile, I mean, that's interesting to see a landfill that's turning down revenue.
And now they're concerned with contamination, I'm guessing.
It's a class 1 landfill. Well, I mean, that's the least contamination they should be worried about versus PFAS and other things, which we're fixing to get off topic, but yes, sir.
Okay, 2, 3 questions. Permits. When you use the word dredging,
Right.
we need permits, correct?
In some states, yes.
I'm familiar with Jersey. I've been working 54 years
Right.
on construction and excavation projects.
Absolutely.
All material that comes out of New Jersey now usually comes up tested as regulated material.
Okay.
Okay. It doesn't go to landfills here so much as Pennsylvania.
Right.
Cost is astronomical.
Right.
You can be assured that dredging's road runoff and everything else into the lake, it comes up at least as regulated material, it could be even more. The requirements that I see are that everything that comes out of anywhere has to be tested.
Correct. And typically as far as the materials, we would run a sample as far as waste profile. No landfill is going to take anything without a waste profile.
Correct.
To know exactly what the heavy metals, the variety, the thresholds on all of this. I'm not this all. with any project, and probably more getting into our industrial side when we start talking about in dredging. But if a lake has a need to dredge for whatever reason, if you have boat lanes and those boat lanes are filling in and you need to open up those boat lanes, then obviously we're going to work with the client. We're not an engineering firm as far as getting all of the permits. We will work with you to get the permits, and we have a lot of knowledge from the permitting standpoint. But if you get into a project that's going to have permits, more than likely you're going to have a consultant or an engineering firm working with you already. By the time we get involved, it's usually, our client usually has an idea, somewhat of an idea on what permits are going to be required. We can help get those permits, but that is not our primary job, as far as just getting all of the permits. But again, we can definitely help out with that effort. But you are right. You definitely need to understand weed harvesting, hydro raking, the root raking. Typically, those are fairly simple projects with very little involvement from Emily here.
Question over here.
Yes.
This is more a comment, but like landfills, they have to have a daily cover requirement. Sometimes they have plenty of daily cover, sometimes they don't. So you might talk to them this month, and they don't want the material. If you talk to them next month, they might want the material. The other thing is with New Jersey raising the flood hazard zone by about 5 feet. There's a lot of places on the coast that want fill material. A lot of those are on contaminated sites, so they'll take. So it's really a timing. You really need like an expert in disposal to like be out there looking for you on various projects if you're going to get the cheapest cost.
Right.
So it is kind of you need that expert, you need a project that needs the material, and you need the timing.
Right. And we're definitely open and flexible to help with that effort as far as trying to find a disposal option for you, because we understand that our services may be cost effective, but then as far as the transportation and disposal of materials really can knock you over the budget on your project. And obviously it's in our best interest to try to help you out and find a cost effective disposal option so that you can in fact afford to do the project. I can promise you we are involved in countless projects where we put a lot of effort into the project only to realize that at the end of the day the budget's just not there and the project never occurs. Mini dredge here, very non-invasive as far as basically you have a hydraulic open face pump that is basically lowered on this cable and removing that organic matter from the bottom of the lake. Really important here, and you can see kind of understanding what our services are, how we couple that with a bathymetric survey. When you look at your lake and you understand the depth and you may be able to identify kind of the problem or more suspect areas that you need to remove material from. Because you could have a lake you could have a cove that's 7 feet deep, but it may have 18 inches to 24 inches of organic matter on the bottom, So that's a little bit from the equipment standpoint. Let's talk about dewatering. I will refer to these as kind of a necessary evil, dewatering bags. I'm not sure the DEP's view on dewatering bags, but basically dewatering bags are from the pros standpoint, they're very cost effective because you're using gravity to dewater the solids. These bags are, they can sit there. The problem, some of the necessary evil that I'll talk about with this, Paragon has the ability to utilize dewatering bags. It's not our preference. And the reason being is because these bags are, number one, they're unsightly. If you're dealing with residential clients, nobody wants one of these large bags sitting on their property for the next 2 to 3 months. Because basically after you get through with the solids removal or the matter removal, everything sits in this bag for 2 to 3 months, and then you have to come back, open up the bag, remove all the material, dispose of the bag, things of that nature. But they are cost effective, and you can see in some areas where maybe an agricultural area where they have plenty of real estate, there, it's an acceptable it's cost effective and it's acceptable. Now, we talked a little bit about, we have the ability and kind of the depiction that I showed you earlier was really all the entire, aspect of what we have available to us. Typically, what you're going to see with one of our projects, if we're doing dewatering as well, we have this unit that is basically 10 feet by 40 feet. Then the ancillary equipment, you may be 20 by 80 feet in that footprint total. But basically, that's a hydraulic stand. We'll bring that on site, you raise that centrifuge up in the air, and we're basically pumping from a hydraulic unit straight to that unit. You're spinning out the solids immediately. The liquids are being reintroduced back to the lake. We'll talk about on some projects as far as the quality of those liquids here in a moment. And basically, the day that we stop removing material from your lake, the solids are taken care of. They're hauled off that day. We remove our equipment, and everything's gone, and that project is complete. There's no dewatering bags, no need to come back 2 to 3 months later. But that's very specific to a hydraulic dredging type operation, and not needed for weed harvesting or root raking and things of that nature, hydro raking. So let's talk about some projects. This project here is kind of unique. This was an emergency PO with the Ohio State University, the Ohio State. This is the Scarlet course at their golf course. Basically, the university had pulled the lake down. They used this lake for irrigation for the golf course. They had so much sediment and debris at the intake of the irrigation system that they actually pulled the lake down so that they could put personnel in chest waders, and they could go out there daily and rake material away from the intake of the irrigation system. Paragon, we were on site for 3 days, basically took that sediment down 5 feet below the intake and a 70-foot radius around the intake. And then, not our preference, but you can see this pond in the background here. Because it was an emergency PO, we placed a silt fence across that the pond structure, the bridge stanchions there, and we were basically just pumping this material, this silty material on the other side of the bridge, and then allowing it to dewater through that silt fence. Now, obviously, long term, that's not a great solution because all that silt's going to run straight back down to that unit. But from a short-term standpoint, within 2 days, we were able to get them back up in operation for at least the next few months. Mountain Lakes, we talked about that. Really a two-pronged approach to Mountain Lakes, working with Mitchell over there, hydro raking and weed harvesting. Really wanted us to focus on the shallow coves as far as hydro raking, removing as much of the organic matter from the leaf debris, wood, limbs, logs, things of that nature from the shallow coves, and then the weed harvesting. This lake, Mountain Lakes. Well, you can actually see it in this picture here. This is birchwood that we're on currently. You can see right there the issue they had at birchwood. And so now I will tell you, we would prefer. Let me be very specific. We're not a weed eradication company. Okay, we're not going to eliminate. Birchwood is going to have Eurasian milfoil, lily pads, everything next year. We're not a weed eradication. We are a management company, okay? And it's a little early in the season right now, but you have the balance of lake use in July, June, August, and us being on your lake during that time frame, and versus us being here now and avoiding that high traffic area. Currently, we're working Monday through Saturday at Birchwood or at Mountain Lakes on all their lakes. Sunday we do not work just due to the noise ordinances that they have there locally. But you can see the issue that Mountain Lakes had at Birchwood currently. We're taking the lily pads. The conversation that I had with one of the residents, her statement was, "Well, I like the lily pads," and so and it's that conversation of lily pads are beneficial to a point, and then when you get to that point where duckweed lily pads have totally darkened the surface of your lake, and your dissolved oxygen is starting to drop out and things of that nature. So we are, again, using the weed harvester. The lily pads, we're removing some of those lily pads. There will be more of a bloom after we leave, I'm sure. But that's, we currently have the 3 pieces of equipment there, And then we have the partnership with the borough as far as them. We bring the organic matter to shore, and then like we've talked about, they have a front end loader, manpower, and trucks that can come in, grab the material, and disposition of the material. Yes, sir.
Is there a public access that you're working there, or is it through private residents?
So it is a public access. There's a pavilion right here that you see, and actually, Birchwood, they actually have, it's a very nice facility, actually. I was very impressed. I mean, they actually have, I believe, high school swim meets in this location here. So there's public access here, and then there's walking tracks, hiking trails around this lake, and they're actually wide enough for the front end loader and the truck to travel down to get to the material. And we've coordinated.
Butts up to the Torn.
You what?
Right.
It butts up to the Torn.
Right,
So we've coordinated with them as far as where they wanted us to pile the material, basically, so that they had access. You can see this area right here. They actually go into the woods here. There's a trail, and there's actually an area that they are able to turn the truck around at the end of that. And so that's kind of just an overwood of Mountain Lakes and that Birchwood project. Kind of a unique project here, Michigan City Marina. It's adjacent to Michigan Lake, or Lake Michigan, excuse me. But it also has, it was also on an active salmon run. And we just happened to provide this services at this project during the spawn, which offered some opportunities. We had quite a few visits from the Wildlife Fisheries Department. Basically, we set up a silt fence around the project area, and I guess I should explain this. This is a mechanical boat lift right here, and basically this area had silted in to the extent that several of their larger boats they could no longer lift out of the area, out of that water. And so we came in, put in a silt fence so that we could keep the TSS low, make sure we didn't have the suspended solids that affected the salmon run. We were not able to work in the mornings because apparently salmon are very happy in the morning, and that's their higher spawn rate in the mornings. And so, and then we had a unit here on the shore, or on the dock here, where we were actually taking the solids, spinning out the solids, and returning the water to the actual tributary there in a sub 5 micron environment there. Just a couple more, just to give you an idea of what our capabilities are. This was with the Pennsylvania DEP, basically a coal mine. This lagoon clean out here, concrete sides, concrete bottom, but had, because of an old coal mine, actually has about 600 gallons per minute of groundwater coming up in that area from the coal, from the mining operation in the past. You can see the color of the water due to the sulfur, the iron content. And this actually discharges into a trout stream where the state of Pennsylvania actually, where they stock the stream with trout. And so DEP was very prevalent on this project as well. You can see the before, you can see after. But what was great about this project is we were able to show the analytics, and actually the water that was normally discharged out of this lagoon to this stream, to the trout stream, was actually dirtier than the water that we were putting back in. And so we were actually given the approval by the DEP to discharge directly into the stream instead of back into this lagoon. And we were returning clean fluid back to that stream at about 120 gallons a minute.
What were you removing from that?
So there was this lagoon. This is a sediment basin, and so basically it had about 4.5 feet of sludge on the bottom of this lagoon. So we were actually hydraulically removing the sediment out of this lagoon.
And that came through the groundwater?
That came through the groundwater. That's correct. Basically, you can see they have a peroxide tank here that they're treating that material to kind of precipitate out the sulfur, the iron. And so we were looking for a volume. They were looking for the volume from a sediment standpoint. The last one I'd say, just to kind of show you more along the lines of what you guys are looking at. This is a New Philadelphia stormwater retention pond. They actually wanted about 18 inches of sediment removed from this lagoon, from this pond. Obviously, you can see the duckweed infestation that it had originally. So that's before, and this is after. And then these are the solids that were being taken off the bottom of that lagoon. And we utilize the mini hydraulic dredge that we looked at that's on the cable system for this project. Typically with that unit, we're going to, almost like like we discussed with the Dolphin as far as a bathymetric survey, we're going to traverse in an orderly manner across a lake and then both ways to make sure we get a good coverage from that standpoint.
So I got a question.
Yes, ma'am.
How do you monitor the depth of your removal?
So we'll actually run, so we have a cable link that we can monitor.
Right.
As far as that, from that standpoint, to know exactly the depth of the unit. And then we can also run the Dolphin as well to verify. Typically on a project like that, we're gonna run the Dolphin before and after, so that we can show the client exactly how much sediment was removed.
Okay.
Again, just final thoughts here, hopefully what you're seeing is a wide diversity of projects. Our openness to work with clients and just to be very flexible. And then just the fact that we've had some pretty delicate projects from a water quality standpoint with the trout and salmon. On that project, I did forget to remember that is in fact the project where we had trout coming across the shaker screen and being reintroduced into the water. I can't give you a trout count of how many got reintroduced versus whether any of my workers had trout one night. And then just from a client standpoint, that just gives you kind of a flavor of some of the companies and entities that we've worked for. You may not realize this is Muirfield, which is Jack Nicklaus's home golf course. We actually have a project that will be starting with Muirfield. It was actually supposed to start earlier this year, and they decided to wait till after the Memorial Golf Tournament, which is in Dublin, Ohio. But we have a couple of lakes on that Muirfield that we'll be working on as well. Any questions? Yes, ma'am.
So, if you're doing those codes, right, how long, because like you're taking sediment out of a code, so you're making a hole. So isn't that silt from the rest of the lake just gonna flow right back in there?
Typically, we're just
how long does that take?
So typically, we're just hydro-raking or root raking, and so that code is typically sloped to the deeper areas, and we're just basically taking the organic matter off the top. We're not actually digging a hole as far as removing soils currently in mountain lakes. We're just removing the organic materials off the top of the lake floor.
Okay, but isn't that just gonna fill right back? Isn't that also just gonna?
It will. I mean, you guys have beautiful lakes here with a lot of tree coverage, and that's why I say we're a maintenance company. But the key for lake health, right, is not to overwhelm the lake, right? There's a certain amount of organic material that's healthy for a lake. Right. Just like there's a certain amount of the lily pads that are healthy for a lake. But it's when you have not addressed that situation over years and your entire lake, I tell you, I hate that. When your entire lake bottom, the coves and everything is just completely covered and you have the biodegradation that's going on and the chemical reactions, then basically that's what we're helping with, is removing that organic material off the bottom. And then also the weed harvesting on the top end as well.
Does that take, I'm sorry, one just follow up. Does that take the curly leaf pondweed?
It will.
Out by the roots?
It will, yes ma'am.
Okay.
We've had success with curly duckweeds. I mean, actually the algae, where the algae mats that you were talking about, we've had success in removing those because they're firm enough. I mean, obviously the very fine algae is going to flow through that screen, but the mats that have a little bit more substance to them, we're able to remove those from the pond surface as well. Yes, sir.
Besides sucking out the organic matter and the sediment, does it also suck up sand?
It can, yes, it can. So, and that's where we have to stay off the bottom. We're not going to be right on the bottom. We're going to be approximately a foot to 18 inches above the bottom and pulling a negative and sucking that loose material off the bottom. We could get to the bottom. If it's a sandy bottom, it's going to suck sand. In an industrial application, if you have a clay liner, which is just a compacted clay, we're able to pull all the material, all the sediment off a clay lagoon, clay lime lagoon, and not damage the clay liner.
Because another hydro raker couldn't get the sand because it just goes right through the rake.
Right.
But they can get all the organic matter.
Yeah. I mean, if you're after the sand, the silt, I mean, yeah, but then yes, we could do that with a hydraulic pump.
Thank
I saw on the one slide for Mountain Lakes, Birchwood Lake, you removed 150 cubic yards.
Thank you.
How do you quantify that volume? Because is it a dewatered volume or? How do you
So I appreciate you bringing that up because I obviously failed to mention that. We've been on Birchwood for about 10 days now. We've removed approximately 150 cubic yards. We know that our hopper basically will hold 3 yards, but ultimately Birchwood Lakes has a 5-yard truck. And that is an estimation. I mean, looking at the number of loads, like yesterday when we were there, the city was there taking out material. They have a 5-yard truck, but they have the truck heaped above the side rails. So basically that's about a 7-yard load when you look at what they were doing there.
Okay.
And that's what we're doing is we have daily reports that we can provide the city or provide our client that tells exactly what we did that day and gives a volumetric estimate of what was removed.
Okay. Sounds logical.
And the other thing you kind of brought up as well is, and I think the statement was made yesterday, just we're bringing up, this material is drained by the time it gets to shore because we're letting the water flow through that belt. Now, obviously, as you bring lily pads, milfoil, all of that, that stuff obviously starts to break down as it loses its, you know, as it turns from green to not so green and starts to break down a little bit. Any other questions? Well, thank you again. I appreciate the time.